All right. Today is July 31st, 2024. My name is John Raymond Irving. I'm in Blacksburg, Virginia in the Virginia Tech Library. Joining me today for an oral history interview is Don Vaughan. This interview is part of an oral history project for veterans from Virginia Tech Corps of Cadets who served in the Vietnam War. Before we get started, Mr. Vaughan, do I have your permission to record this interview?
Yes.
Excellent. All right, so Mr. Vaughan, I'm going to just try and walk you through your life some chronologically, and if there's anything that I miss or don't get to, feel free to interject. And if at any time there's a question you're uncomfortable with, just let me know, and you don't have to respond to anything. So just to get started, where were you born and when was that?
I was born in Roanoke Memorial Hospital in Roanoke.
Did you live there for most of your life?
Yes. My family had a home in Vinton, which is just east of Roanoke, and I lived there until I went in service.
Gotcha. Who did you live there with?
My parents and 5 siblings.
Wow, 5 siblings. What were your parents like?
My father worked for the Veterans Administration Hospital in Salem. My mother was housewife. My dad liked the outdoors, liked to hunt and fish, and took as much time as he could. And he worked almost 30 years at the hospital. And so he had plenty of vacation time and things like that he could get off in the fall. There were maybe as many as a half a dozen or sometimes as many as a dozen small beagles at the house, which he used for his hunting. My mother was probably a very gentle person, understood us. And I guess by the time my youngest brother came along, it was, oh, well, I've done the best I could. So he got a few more privileges than the rest of us.
That's how that goes. It's the youngest child treatment.
Exactly.
So where were you out of the 5?
I was number 3.
So right in the middle of the pack.
Exactly.
You mentioned your dad worked for the Veterans Hospital. Was he also a veteran?
No, he went to work for the hospital in January of 1943. He did report for the draft, but during a routine physical exam, there was some kind of a peanut-shaped growth on or in one of his lungs. So he was, I guess, classified, 4F or whatever, and so he did not serve.
So you mentioned you grew up in Vinton, Virginia. What was that like?
Really a small town when I was there, and it's not much larger now. I'd say there were probably 4,000 people, something like that, when I was a kid, and we knew a lot of the people in the town. The elementary school was probably 8 blocks away, and we walked back and forth, usually with people in the neighborhood or my siblings. Having 2 older brothers, who were already in school. Yeah.
How much older were your older brothers?
My oldest brother was 5 years, and my older brother was 3 years older.
What did you like to get up to when you were a kid?
No, I'm sorry, say that again.
What did you like to get up to? What did you do?
Usually, while I was growing up, the kids in the neighborhood would come to our small backyard, and we would kick a ball around trying to play soccer or baseball or something like that. We had had bases established in the backyard. Usually there was a garden in the backyard as well, so we grew a lot of our own vegetables, the potatoes, and I think there were several rhubarb plants and green beans, things like that, or go to an orchard and buy a bushel of peaches for $5 and $6 and can those or that kind of thing. I carried newspapers. I probably started when I was about 12 years old. My brother, older brother, started the route, and then I started helping him. Eventually, he gave it up, and I took it over. And I carried the newspapers until I was a senior in high school.
And where did you go to high school?
I attended William Byrd High School, the old high school, which is now called Billy Byrd Apartments.
What in high school did you like to do? Did you do any sports?
No sports. I occasionally attended meetings of the science club, but since I had an afternoon newspaper route, I had to, and usually the newspapers were delivered by 3 o'clock to my pickup point. So, so as soon as school was out, I'd leave and then start the paper route.
That's cool. It's really interesting. What did you like to study in high school?
I would say for the most part, math came easy. English was not exactly one of my strong points. I like most of the sciences, just the general science and biology and botany. I didn't take physics because it wasn't necessarily required. I did take chemistry. At that time, when I started high school, there were only 2 foreign languages being offered, Spanish and Latin.
Which did you choose?
Neither. By the time I got into high school, French was being offered. So I took 2 years of French with a teacher from England who had lived and worked in France. So she knew the correct pronunciation, and rather than trying to just mimic a word or mimic a sound, she was teaching us the correct way to place the tongue in the mouth, and and the opening of the mouth and all of that. So now don't ask me to what I remembered, how to speak it, or anything like that, because I don't.
I wouldn't dare.
That's been 60-some years.
I've taken a foreign language a lot more recently, and I still couldn't tell you anything about it. Did the French knowledge ever help you when you were in Vietnam?
No, not necessarily. We, I don't know. A lot of the communication that we had with the Vietnamese people, I know. Of course, the French were there up until 1954, and a lot of the people could speak French. So when we were taught a few Vietnamese words, but like I said, between the English that we knew and what little bit the Vietnamese knew, what little bit of French maybe that some of the GIs knew, and sign language as well. so we managed to communicate fairly well.
Did you always know that you were planning on going to college?
Pretty much, yeah.
What made you feel inclined to do that?
I guess in some ways, well, I'd seen the path that my 2 older brothers had taken, and they both dropped out at age 16. And I wanted to, continue on with my education.
At what point did you decide to go to Virginia Tech?
That was, the choice of Tech was probably my main focus. I did apply to other schools, but like I said, going here at Tech was probably my main focus.
What was appealing about Virginia Tech to you?
Well, there's a joke, and you've probably heard it as well. And I think I told it to you over the phone. It was far enough away that whatever I did not get back home, and I was not that less than 50 miles from home if I needed to get there.
That's awesome. What did you study when you were here?
I was majored in Forestry and Wildlife Management.
How'd you enjoy that?
I liked it, yeah. Those, the professors that I had, I enjoyed most of them. There were a couple, you know. I think we all have that experience.
Certainly.
But yeah, I enjoyed it and enjoyed learning more and about, just different animals and plants in general.
You mentioned your dad was a big wildlife guy as well. Is that kind of what aided in your interest in that?
I think so, yeah.
Did you do a lot of that?
And I had a couple of friends, older friends, who had graduated from tech and one in forestry. And then he kind of changed his focus, became a stockbroker.
Remind me, what year or what years were it that you went to Virginia Tech?
I entered school in September 1963 and graduated in June of 1968. Again, the joke there is I majored in freshman English, so so it took a little while to complete the coursework.
When you were at Virginia Tech, what made you join the Corps Cadets?
At the time, it was mandatory.
Was that for your entire stay at Virginia Tech?
No. When I entered Tech, like I said, in September of '63, any entering freshman, unless they had some appropriate excuse, were required to be in the Corps Cadets their first 2 years. In June of 1964, the Board of Visitors repealed that. So, when I entered school, the Corps Cadets had 18 companies. You had the 16 companies, band company, and what was called T Company. T Company were the athletes. And they didn't do quite as much as we did as far as the military training and things like that. But, yeah, they were still, if they were interested in the military career and the military experience, they were part of that. During the pandemic, my classmates and I tried to decide how many freshmen in my beginning class. I think we'd settled on somewhere between 35 and 40. So you consider 35 to 40 freshmen, and there were 16 companies, plus the band and T Company. So, quite a number entering the tech entering the Corps at that time. Yeah. After that requirement was set aside, but repealed, whatever, we lost probably a third of the membership of the Corps Cadets. The freshmen just decided they did not want to continue.
Or do you think you would have gone into the Corps Cadets had it not been mandatory?
I don't know. I've never thought about that.
When you joined, were you aware of the Vietnam War and what was going on over there?
Somewhat, yes.
Were you anticipating having to go to war afterwards?
I think any of us that stayed in the Corps for the 4 years and were commissioned, I think we were all aware that we were going, yes.
What was that like? I know you said you graduated in '68. That was right around the Tet Offensive and when everything was picking up. What was it like to be over here and watch the war heat up?
Yeah, we did a lot of that. The news programs at 6 or 6:30 or whatever, we definitely were aware of all of that. Tet was in January of '68. The first Tet, that's the one that most people are aware of. There was another offensive in '69 as well. Yeah, I think we, like I said, we're aware. And, well, one of the things that I wrote about and is in the file that I gave you, probably the summer of '64, I formed my, a really lasting memory of Vietnam. That summer, I worked for the U.S. Forest Service in Montana on a fire tower. And I was in the fire tower probably 6 to 8 weeks. And sometime in early August, early to mid-August, a light airplane flew over the tower. And then it circled and came back and flew over a second time. I really, I just thought it was somebody getting flight time and really didn't pay any attention. It flew over the third time and then it disappeared. And then I got a radio message from someone in the forest supervisor's office saying that the plane had dropped a package for me. So I remembered the flight path and went out and found what they had dropped. What they had dropped was an assortment of maybe candy or chewing gum, something like that, a current newspaper, and a copy of Newsweek magazine. In that Newsweek magazine, now this was August of '64, the Gulf of Tonkin, and the different. Well, I only saw that one issue that summer, but that kind of stuck with me, and I can still remember that there was the picture on the cover of that particular magazine was a flight deck from an aircraft carrier with, they weren't F-5s, they were F-8s on the deck.
Yeah. What was that like to become aware? What was going through your mind?
Yeah, well, I knew that we were involved. I really did not have any idea that we would get involved as we were. Yeah. That it seems to me probably just an isolated incident.
Then it was not, unfortunately.
And it was not.
Yeah. So during your freshman year of college, and you said that was 1963?
63, 64, yes.
Do you recall where you were for JFK's assassination?
Yes.
Can you tell me about that?
I was in Price Hall taking my, I don't remember, or botany classes or zoology classes, but we had class and maybe a lab that afternoon, and we were a friend of mine, and we were coming back to the upper quad across the drill field and found out about it. And the campus itself, you might be able to compare to 9/11. Very quiet, very solemn. Very few people were talking. Not a lot of noise going on. And immediately, I think, like I said, I believe that was a Friday, and immediately the Corps of Cadets began to prepare for a ceremony to honor the president. And probably the hardest part of that was, we normally marched at 120 steps per minute or something like that. But anyway, to march at 80 per. So, the drums and everything out are all slowed down, and just learning to march at that pace.
Was that the most memorable part of that ceremony? I'm sorry, did that ceremony actually happen?
Yes.
Anything else you remember from it?
No. That's another thing I really given any thought to. let me circle back to that later.
At what point did you realize that you were going to go overseas?
I think probably my junior year. A lot of upperclassmen, maybe a class of 64, 65, we knew they were already there. I think the early part of my senior year, I took the flight aptitude test and passed that. And I was not behind any controls or anything like that. And apparently that went on a record someplace. So when I reported for active duty in 68, probably the second day I was on active duty. Are you still interested in flight school? No.
Understandable.
It was bad enough to be. I mean, my active duty orders in June of 68 stated that I would be in a overseas area within a year. And I was. So, I knew, a year in advance, I knew I would be going. As far as becoming a helicopter pilot in Vietnam, no.
I'm surprised to hear that, and I guess I didn't realize you were talking about helicopters, because that would have been an incredibly dangerous job. But I mean, why? Why wouldn't you have wanted to go to flight training during that time? It would have gotten you out of Vietnam for at least a while.
No, my my roommate, he took flight training while he was here, and I knew where he was headed. So I had no desire to do the same thing, and I visit with him every 2 or 3 months, and we have breakfast together and things like that. And his experiences as a helicopter pilot has closed him off. He will not talk about his experiences.
You mean you still meet with him today?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, he will not talk about it. Occasionally he'll come out with something, and ask me if in the reading I've done or research I've done or whatever, did this particular location come up or this particular location. He told me that his particular unit had a policy that if you came back with bullet holes in your helicopter, you laid $5 for every bullet hole on the bar, and you bought drinks. He said he came back one time. He put $65 on the bar. 13 bullet holes.
That's scary.
In 12 months that he was assigned over there, he earned 12 air medals. So and I can appreciate, why he won't talk about it. And I've even, he took pictures and things like that, and I've tried to, let him allow me to look at the pictures, but they're in the house someplace, But there are some things, occasionally he will drop a little bit of his experiences. And I think I told you that out of my 13 classmates, can't remember now if it was 5 or 6 of us served in Vietnam. My roommate, he was with the 101st Airborne. Another served in the 173rd Airborne Brigade as he was in an artillery unit. Another thought he was being smart. And he thought, well, I'll join the Navy and I'll stay out of country. I'll be on a ship. No, he was assigned to a CB unit, building bridges in country.
It's unfortunate for him, I suppose.
Yeah.
Was there anyone else who you kept a relationship with outside of your roommate from college?
Probably since our 50th reunion in 2017, I've had more contact with my classmates, and we've occasionally had time to sit and talk about our war experiences, or just when some of us, some of the class graduated in 67, and there were 3 or 4 of us didn't graduate until 68. So as we left school, we kind of went our own separate ways. There was one classmate, class of 67, that I kept contact with after graduation, and our paths crossed again while we were in Cam Ranh Bay in Vietnam. And he and I, remained fairly close, for the past 50 or 60 years.
I'm glad to hear it. How did you all keep in contact when you were in Vietnam? Do you write letters, or?
Like I said, with my roommate, we wrote letters, but the mail service was extremely slow. Yeah. I could finish a roll of film and do prepaid processing, mail the package from Vietnam to Palo Alto, California, have it developed, and come back in 4 days.
That's pretty awesome.
A letter from me to, say, my roommate, who was in the northern part of South Vietnam, it would maybe take 2 weeks for the letter to travel through all the units to get to him.
Was that a thing mostly just within Vietnam, or was that a similar situation if you were writing home to someone in the States?
No, if I was writing home or whatever, the mail was fairly quick. Okay. But like I said, just all the mail clerks within the country, and traveling through all the different units that it had to get from one place to another. It was fairly slow.
Mr. Vaughan, I want to get into your service, but real quick, I want to go back and touch on something we were talking about before the interview, and that was that you've been interested in photography for a long time. When did that begin?
Like I said, I started taking pictures probably in high school, and using an old Kodak Brownie 127 film, black and white, that kind of thing. And it's just something that was interested in. And I guess I bought my first 35 millimeter camera when I was at Fort Stewart in Georgia. The company commander there, knew I was interested in photography, and he had a camera that I think he had brought home from Vietnam. So he sold it to me for a fair price, and I just started taking pictures then. And some of the slides and pictures that were on that flash drive were made with that camera. And like I said, I just continued to take pictures while I was overseas, and since. I bought a number of different cameras. In the year and a half that I was in Vietnam, I probably bought 6, 7, 8 cameras. They were fairly inexpensive, $50 to $80, something like that. I had several of them stolen, and a couple of them damaged, and whatever else. If carrying the camera during monsoon season is not a good idea.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So had a lot of things like that happen. But and like I said, after coming out of service, I still continued my interest in photography. Took some classes at Virginia Western in accounting and also in photography. I took probably nearly every class that the Virginia Western Community College offered in photography. Bought a lot of darkroom equipment, set that up in my basement, and I would spend, a day, something like that, every 2 or 3 weeks, just developing, processing pictures. And I've become, I guess, the family photographer. I tell the family especially. I've been to a number of birthday parties and a number of weddings and other social events, but I was never there because I'm not in any of the pictures.
That's a coveted role right there. You got yourself out of having to pretend to look pretty.
Yep, I was never there.
That's really interesting. Did that passion for photography grow during the war, or was that when would you say that really took a hold of being meaningful to you?
Yeah, I think it did increase, during the war. My war experiences were probably different. Well, like I said, you had done 5 or 6 or 7, 8 of these interviews, and I'm sure everyone that you've talked to, a little story comes to mind. A long-time friend of mine agreed to be interviewed like this probably 10 years ago now. And the interview was conducted in probably in Southwest Virginia, far Southwest Virginia, Grundy or something like that, or Tazewell anyway. And the lady who conducted the interview, after it was over, he answered her questions and added any comments that he had. And after the interview, she said that she had conducted 5 or 6 interviews. And she said, "Are you sure all of you were in the same war?" Because everybody's experiences were different. What I would say the majority of the American people see or understand of the war in Vietnam, we were all out there in the jungles firing M16s or machine guns or whatever. But that's not necessarily true. I'm sure it has changed since, but for the Army, when I was there were only 3 combat arms: the infantry, the armor, and the artillery. Everything else was support. The Signal Corps, the Ordnance Corps, the engineers, quartermaster, all of that was support. So every one of those that you saw there with that M16 or all that, or, firing a weapon, there were probably 3 to 4 that made sure that that person had the gun, had the ammunition, and had the meals.
And I'm sorry, I didn't touch on this earlier, but just to clarify, what branch of the military were you in?
Yeah, I was Corps of Engineers.
With the Army?
Yeah, but with the Army, yes.
Understood.
Could I jump in with a follow-up question? I'm curious about your experience of the war as a photographer. I know it was a hobby, but did that make you feel like more of an observer of the war?
Okay, well, in the time that I was overseas, and I've told a number of people this. I was in Vietnam for 1.5 years. In that time period, I fired a weapon 4 times, and none of that was involved in combat. I had been in country maybe a month and a half. when I first went into Vietnam and was assigned to my engineer unit, I was issued an M14. Within a month to a month and a half, the M14s were taken away and we were issued M16s. So each platoon or each company loaded onto 2.5-ton trucks and went out to a rifle range to familiarize ourselves with the weapons. To me, that seemed a little odd, but a little ironic to be firing a weapon at a rifle range in a war zone. And but the other 3 times came fairly close together. Again, the unit I was assigned to and attached to another unit, that unit engineer company had not fired its weapons for a while, so we just lined up along a highway and fired into a hillside. Again, just to see if the weapons worked. On that particular incident or occasion, like I said, we were trying to fire into a slope, and way up at the top of the slope was a little Vietnamese boy. And we yelled at him, waved at him, and he just sat up there. So I looked at the company commander and I said, I'll handle this. There was a sapling, maybe 1.5 to 2 inches halfway down the slope. I fired an M79 grenade launcher at that tree. It hit at the base. The tree fell over. There was no danger because of the bursting radius of the weapon, and the boy disappeared. We fired our weapons into the hillside and went back to work. The 4th time, again with the same unit that I was attached to, there was a perceived threat of enemy activity in the area. So a unit of 1st Cavalry Division assigned maybe a squad or a squad and a half for extra security at this camp I was in. When they left, when the extra security departed, they did not want to take the ammunition with them that they had brought in there. So they set up their mortar, and anybody that wanted to could drop 5 or 6 rounds down the tube of the mortar and fire it out into the jungle just to get rid of it. So, that was the 4 opportunities that I had to fire a weapon. So my experiences, there was no combat as such. I was only fired at one time, and I saw the person that did that. It was a Vietnamese soldier who was supposed to be guarding a work site that we had. And I think he had maybe a little too much rice wine or smoked a little too much marijuana or whatever. He just came out and fired about 4 or 5 rounds in our directions and went back into his little hovel or whatever. And, well, at my particular work site, I was a platoon leader. I probably had 50 men with me, and I think there were 4 Vietnamese soldiers in this little encampment there by the side of the road. I knew there was a MACV, Military Assistance Command, Vietnam, just probably 2 miles down the road with an interpreter. So I told my platoon sergeant, I'm going down and get an interpreter to kind of diffuse the situation. If another round comes our way, I don't want anything left. We are defending ourselves. So I went down, got an interpreter, came up, he talked to the people, and we didn't have any more trouble after that. But, 4 on 50 would not have been a fair fight.
You speak about that experience like somewhat nonchalantly, but what was that like in the moment? Was that as tense as I can imagine it would be, or
Uh, Not especially. Uh, Actually, I was told. I mean, we were removing fill from a collapsed concrete arch bridge, and when you have traffic bypassing you, going past you, uh, plus you have lots of heavy machinery working, whether it be a grader or D7 dozer or whatever, you're not always listening to what's going on. Someone actually told me that we had been fired at. I did not hear it myself.
your only experience, you said, with being engaged in combat or someone firing at you?
Yes.
So if I can just back up a little bit, you mentioned you were in the Army and you were in the Corps of Engineers.
Yes.
What primarily did you do in Vietnam?
Well, as I just referenced, we replaced damaged bridges, built roads, expanded a parking apron for an airfield, built a little bit of housing. I was a liaison officer between a civilian contractor and the Army. The civilian contractor was to produce asphalt, blacktop, or whatever for a road that we were paving. So I was just basically there to make sure we were getting our money's worth.
Sounds like you had a somewhat unique job in your relationship with the Vietnamese citizens. What was that like?
Yeah, the civilian contractor was a conglomeration of some worldwide construction companies. It was called RMK BRJ. The R was for Raymond Brothers. MK was Milliken. But I don't remember what the K was for. But Jones Construction, Brown Construction, and I think Root Construction. It was a conglomeration of worldwide construction companies that were in there. Out of necessity for that time period that I was, like I said, the liaison officer, I had to work with the Americans that were that were with the contractors, as well as the Vietnamese actually operated the plant. I mean, they did all the physical work. So working with them, making sure they were the civilians with the contracting company. Of course, they supervised the Vietnamese, but I had to get my trucks through there and get them loaded. And RMK BRJ also had trucks of their own that had to be filled. So sometimes getting one truck in front of the other, a few people got annoyed. So that had to be handled as well. I only had one experience working directly with a Vietnamese military unit on the national highway that we had been working on and replacing these bridges. We had driven across this one particular bridge several days and several weeks for that matter. And then one morning we were on our way to the job site and traffic is totally stopped on that highway. Overnight, someone had planted an explosive device on the bridge and collapsed it. Oh, wow. And this would be like, the bridge on this, and this was what was called a QL, which is a national highway. So it would basically, if you came up the back way of 460 or Route 11, it would basically, the road is cut in two. There's no travel in either direction. So I had to wait for a Vietnamese engineer unit to bring out a bridge, a Bailey bridge, which could be assembled on site. And my platoon basically carried the heavier pieces, the side panels, and the Vietnamese engineers placed the pins that held it all together. And that took us probably about 3 hours to construct the bridge long enough to reach, to go across the span. And that worked out extremely well.
Can you remember what year that was?
That would have been probably October, maybe November of '69.
So this is nearing the halfway mark of your service. Is that correct?
No.
What time did you get over there?
I went over in late August of '69 and came home in March of '71. The normal tour of duty, and they called it Tour 365, the normal tour was 1 year. After probably a year and a half of service, when I was commissioned, I knew that I had a 2-year active duty and then I think 4 to 6 years of reserve duty. Well, I did not want the reserve time. So after about a year and a half, I extended my active duty for 1 year and extended my tour of duty in Vietnam for 6 months.
Was that a difficult decision to make to keep yourself in Vietnam? Or did it just feel like the natural thing to do?
I could have come home, and served out another year here in the States, but I decided, to stay in the country and ask for a transfer from one part of the country to another. My first year, I was in the southern part of the country, which was called the Mekong Delta. When I extended part of the agreement, or part of what I asked for was to be transferred to one of the northern areas. And I ended up in a place called Phan Rang and was there for, I think, 3 months, and then went to Cam Ranh for the last 3 months that I was in country.
Why is it that you wanted to move to the north?
Just a change of scenery. The Mekong Delta, of course, the river itself and the tidal flow, and a lot of these bridges that had been damaged or destroyed that we were replacing were not actually over streams. They were over canal system. The French, when they were there and occupied, not really occupied the country, but when the French Indochina, and the French actually established a system of canals to irrigate the rice fields. So a lot of these bridges were had to be replaced to open up some of those irrigation canals. And like I said, just was interested in a change of scenery.
What was the biggest difference in your experience from going from the southern parts to the northern parts of Vietnam?
When I was in the southern part, I was more hands-on construction, and like I said, replacing bridges or extending parking aprons at airstrips. Like I said, the little bit of housing that I built. When I transferred, I was in the 20th Engineer Brigade, which was in the southern part. The 18th Engineer Brigade was in the northern part of South Vietnam. So, like I said, I just wanted, like I said, a change of scenery.
So, Mr. Vaughn, I understand that you weren't in a whole lot of combat. Can you walk me through what an average day in Vietnam looked like for you?
I don't know if I could rightfully say that there was an average day.
Understood.
Some days would start extremely early and would last, depending on what we had to do that day. If I were working at replacing one of these bridges, we may have to work, what would be considered a work day, 8 to 5 or something like that, digging out for footers and placing forms and things like that. If it were the day that we were pouring the concrete for the head walls for these culverts, then that would probably take a little longer. In April of 1970, after probably months, maybe even years of construction, the engineer command in Vietnam was given the job of paving 25 kilometers of road in 1 week. I mean, that's all of the engineers that were scattered from I-Corps down to the Mekong, to pave that. So that's 18 miles of road in 1 week. During that particular week, I would get up at 2 in the morning and breakfast or whatever, and make sure the men were up and the dump trucks were ready. We would go to the plant that was producing the asphalt and start loading the trucks. For security reasons, we could not get on the road until after the sun came up. And then the trucks would go out to the site where the paving train was and dump their loads and come back in and refill and go back out again. Would usually fill trucks until maybe 3 in the afternoon. When the last truck left, I would make a note of it and notify that the paving train that was the last truck coming out. I would then go from the contractor's area back to the company area, and as some of the trucks would come back in and park for the night, I had to make sure that they were fueled for the next day, and any preventive maintenance, was done. The drivers had to make sure that all the fluids were topped off and the battery connections were made, and there were no serious, no flat tires, anything like that. Dinner may have been at 5 or 6 o'clock. Then an operations meeting to talk about what we had done that day and what we were planning to do the next day. And then maybe if there was hot water left, get a shower and in bed maybe by 9:30, 10 o'clock.
Well, I imagine if you're waking up at 2, you ought to be.
So, and that went on for a week. Twice during that week, we were alerted we found out later that it was a South Vietnamese artillery unit had fired a couple of test rounds over our company area and into the swamp beyond our. But we still had to get up, get dressed, flak jacket, steel pot, and rifle, and taking our assigned place on the perimeter. That was one night. The second night, there was some suspicious activity outside of the wire, outside of the perimeter. So again, up and dressed, and that maybe we're up for an hour.
Still a stressful hour, I imagine.
Yeah. And like I said, after a week, the engineer command accomplished this job. It actually paved more than 25 kilometers in a week. The lieutenant who was running the paving train out on the road, he and I got together 2 or 3 days later, and we just started talking about what we had done and what the week was like. And we started adding up numbers. And I think in 7 nights, we had slept 21 hours.
That's brutal.
So, but that was just that one week. I mean, most of the time, we were up by 7 and on the road and back in. So like I said, there were times that we had to stay out longer, and obviously for security reasons, we couldn't be out on the road after dark or out at a work site after dark.
Was there anybody in your squad or platoon who you connected with?
No. Like I said, because the tour was only 1 year, there was a lot of turnover. Probably the lieutenant, who I think he lives in Atlanta now. He was a tech graduate as well. I think class of maybe 66. So he and I, talked quite a bit.
Do you remember what his name was?
Yes.
What was it?
No.
Oh, it's unfortunate. What did you all do to decompress after your days?
Well, being engineers, we could be, let's say, creative. Since we were paving roads and things like that, if somebody wanted a basketball court, we could pave them a basketball court in fairly short order.
That's pretty cool. Did you ever do stuff like that?
Yes, we did. And because we had access to lumber, plywood, and things like that, the platoon leader before I arrived in country actually built the first unit I was assigned to. He actually built the NCO club.
Neat. Did you all spend a lot of time there?
Well, we were because we had my platoon, and the platoon that I took over, had built the NCO club. We were welcome there anytime. But every unit probably had its own clubs. We had an officers club, which was maybe 20 by 20, something like. It was a tent, maybe 20 by 20, something like that, and a bar, and 3 or 4 tables and chairs, things like that. Just some place to go in and sit down and talk.
You mentioned that there was a bar in there. What kind of impact or culture in the military was there that had to do with alcohol?
Quite a bit. A beer at any of the clubs was probably 25 cents. You could get any kind of a mixed drink for probably $1. But then again, we weren't being paid a lot either. So. But we were issued I guess you'd call it an allotment card. You could only buy 2 bottles of booze a month. But there were ways around that as well. A lot of the personnel that worked in the PX may have been, locals, Vietnamese, and they could be distracted or whatever. Oh, you already done that, So, and by like I said, with all of the clubs that there were available, the enlisted club, the NCO club, and the officer club, and you could go in there anytime you want, buy a beer for $0.25 or mixed drink, whatever you wanted. So there was quite a bit of alcohol.
Was that kind of a normal end of the day activity for someone in Vietnam?
A few people, yes.
Similarly, was there any use of marijuana or heroin that you observed or knew about?
Marijuana grew wild. One particular name comes to mind is Cambodian gold.
Yeah.
So marijuana was, it was a weed.
Yeah.
Exactly that. And, it grew wild there. So harvesting it and processing it to make it, I don't know how that occurred, but yeah, there was quite a bit of marijuana, and there were several that were on hard drugs, yes.
What was that like, the differences in the drugs? I understand there's not much stigma around alcohol in the military, but what about, marijuana, for example, or the harder drugs as well?
We tried to discourage, the use of marijuana and the heroin and things like that. I used to joke, it wasn't necessarily true, but I used to joke that I probably burned and destroyed more marijuana than one person could smoke in a lifetime. We were constantly finding little plastic baggies of it in different places. They were not very, most of the enlisted were not very creative in where they hid the drugs.
What kind of trouble would that, or could that get them in?
It could have, in most cases, it may have been just a reprimand by the platoon sergeant or the platoon leader, or maybe some extra work or something like that.
Gotcha.
If it were serious enough of a problem with the heroin or whatever, they could be court-martialed and dishonorable discharge.
Were you ever in charge of reprimanding someone for their use of drugs?
Yes. I was actually an investigating officer and for someone who was going to be court-martialed for the use of drugs. And I interviewed a lot of witnesses and actually interviewed the defendant and made a record of all of that and turned it over to the company commander who recommended a court-martial.
How often did that kind of role come into your day-to-day life? Not necessarily just on the drug side of things, but how often were you working as an administrator versus a construction worker and getting that done?
I could only remember one occasion while I was in Vietnam. I did serve as prosecutor and as defense counsel on 2, maybe 3 court-martials while I was in stateside and stationed at Fort Stewart.
Did you do any like JAG training for that, or?
No.
Gotcha.
No. Just a random selection.
Interesting. How did you enjoy that?
Well, fortunately, I had a co-counsel who was, who maybe knew a little more than I did. It was not something that I liked doing.
Yeah. That's interesting. It's the field I hope to pursue after this, actually. Law, but can't say that I intend on joining the military. So a little bit of a different lane regardless. So, Mr. Vaughan, I want to take a step back a little. We talked about you entering the service, and you actually deployed in 69, is that correct? What was it like while you were leaving to have the anti-war movement growing, and just can you give me some insight on what that was like, how it was growing, and whether or not that was something you'd noticed?
Well, my first year in active duty, I attended the engineer officer basic course at Fort Belvoir. That was 11 weeks. And then I went from there to my first assignment at Fort Stewart, Georgia. There I was a construction platoon leader, and we had projects on the post itself, so that was a learning process in itself. I left Fort Stewart on July 19th, 1969, and flew home in time to watch the first men land on the moon.
That's really, really awesome. What was that like for you?
Yeah, that was interesting experience. Just to sit and watch that happen, and of course, there was the build up and all of the prior experiences, but for Apollo 11 and the men to land on the moon and just to watch that happen was.
There's something really breathtaking about that, just from a human standpoint of us pushing boundaries that are just imposed on us by nature. But we hear a lot now about the space race and its political context within the Cold War. Was that something that you were aware of? And how prevalent is that on your mind when you're watching the Apollo mission?
No, I wouldn't put it in the context of politics or Cold War or anything like that. It was just a wonderful accomplishment. To be even though we had gotten beaten with Sputnik,
yeah,
we were the first to put men on the moon, and then all of the other landings. But I think just 1971, I think maybe July 29th, 71, I think was Apollo 15 was launched, which was, I think, the last mission to the moon. So, a lot of that was going on. Apollo 13 that exploded, I may have seen that on the television, but it really didn't make an impression with me. Yeah. After probably a couple of months in Vietnam, and I think other people that I've talked to, other veterans that I've talked to, they experienced the same thing. It's a routine. You're sleep deprived. And some of them may have been half drunk part of the time. So you're just interested in getting your job done and staying alive. Yeah. So as far as like I said, Cold War and politics or that kind of thing. I don't think that entered into the thinking at all.
While you were there? Well, similarly, what was your reception like when you returned home?
The only thing that comes to mind is that when I flew, like I said, after serving a year, I extended my service in Vietnam for 6 months. As a result of that, I was given 30 days free leave. So I, was flown home for those 30 days. I don't remember the exact route coming back, but I know I flew out of Saigon, and I landed at Travis Air Force Base in California. The flight attendant said, as soon as you get off the plane, go into the bathroom, change your clothes before you board your flight, your civilian flight from San Francisco to the East Coast. I don't, as far as someone calling me a baby killer or spitting on me or anything like that, nothing like that happened.
But was it discouraging enough to return to California and know that there were people who would be upset just by the fact that you served?
Yes.
Can you describe some of what that was like and what was going through your head?
Well, most of what I would have known about it was just through newspaper accounts or whatever. Like I said, I did not experience anything like that personally. I know there were all kinds of, 69 and even into 70 and 71, there were all kinds of war protests in the United States and other places as well. But like I said, I did not personally experience anything like that. I guess the thing that stays with me is the flights and going back and forth. When I went over in August of 69, I flew from Roanoke to Atlanta, changed to what was called then Northwest Orient, and flew to Chicago, from Chicago to Seattle. And we flew out of SeaTac. From Seattle to Anchorage, Anchorage to Japan, Japan to Cameron Bay. That was from SeaTac, it was probably about a 22-hour flight. I think probably a 707, something like that. So when we landed, we were supposed to land going over the first time, we were supposed to land at Yokota Air Force Base. For some reason, we were diverted to Tokyo International. We were not allowed to get off the plane. So we sat while it was refueled and the crew was changed and all of that.
Was that just Tokyo's laws regarding the war?
I don't know. I don't know why the change of landing site or what. Like I said, what was never told. When I came back in September of 70, coming home on 30-day leave, I flew from, like I said, from Saigon and Tan Son Nhut. I don't remember. I probably slept through the flight, but landed in San Francisco, and then civilian flight from there to Roanoke. Going back for my extension, I had to report to McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey. We were supposed to take off at 1 a.m. At 3:30, we were still on the ground. And there was this announcement. You guys go get some sleep, do whatever you want to, be back at noon. The airline just went on strike. So the Army had to, whoever had to arrange another flight for us to. So we did finally get in the air probably about 1 o'clock the following day.
Even the U.S. military cannot defeat the airline systems and their mess.
And, back across the country and landed at Saigon, and, then flights in country, to get me back down south in the Delta. When I came home the second time, I was at Cameron Bay. Of course, there was a reduction in force then. A lot of troops were coming home, so the military was recruiting flights or planes from any place they could find them, anybody that were willing to fly over there and back. I boarded the plane. Of course, it was full, and somebody behind me asked the flight attendant, stewardess as they were called then, what time is it in the United States? And she looked at him and says, "Hell, I don't even know what day it is." This particular airline flew, what am I looking for? Charter flights to London and Paris. They had never been across the international timeline. Oh, wow. So that just had them totally, had her totally confused. Yeah. But, we managed to, reverse the pattern from Cameron to Japan to Anchorage back to SeaTac. And then a civilian flight from there, back home. I went to I was flying military standby. I went to the counter and gave them my ticket. And as other military people came in that were on the same flight, the agent kept stacking tickets on top of tickets on top of tickets, and mine was on the bottom. When he started calling names, he started taking them off the top.
Impossible to do it right.
Well, it turned out okay.
Yeah.
Myself and a sergeant were directed to first class.
Oh, that's awesome. It's a pleasant surprise.
Yeah. And the wheels it wasn't long after the wheels were up that the champagne was coming down them.
It was well deserved.
So we flew to Chicago on first class, and then to Atlanta, and then, like I said, back to Roanoke.
So when you got back to Roanoke, what was that like to return home?
It took, I think, definitely the family were glad to see me and glad that I was well. I would say probably for 8 or 9 months after I returned, I did nothing. Just sleep late and get out whenever I felt like it. Whether I want to go out and take pictures or just get out and be by myself.
Was that as a result of struggling with your service, or were you just happy to not have something to do all the time?
I think probably both. Yeah. I think, well, whether it be the Iraq War or Afghanistan or Vietnam, anyone coming back, especially after a year of that kind of intense environment. I mean, a lot of people were living on coffee, some on alcohol, adrenaline, and that kind of thing. So you're not given that whatever length of time it may have taken, to, like I said, to decompress and readjust. I mean, when you consider the advances that may have been made in science or medicine or whatever in the year and a half that you were gone, just adjusting to life.
On top of that, what was it like to come back into an environment that wasn't so, not necessarily rushed, but like you said, intense? Like there's a certain amount of pressure in everything you do.
Well, I think all of us were different as to how we reacted to that. Like I said, it was nice to come back and not, excuse me, and not have something to do. I didn't have a job waiting on me. I had not worked at school, summer off, went on active duty. So, I did not have a job waiting on me or anything like that when I got home. So, actually just having the time not to have to do anything, kind of being your own person for a while, not having a lot of people depending on you,
And during this time that you said you weren't really doing anything, were you living with your parents again? Did you connect with any veterans or anyone else during that time?
No.
Were you able to talk with your parents at all about your experiences, or?
Yeah, a little bit. Well, I was released from active duty in September of 1971, and I had been home several times. I was, my last 5 months or whatever in service, I was at Fort Belvoir, so I could come home fairly frequently. So my dad and I talked about, just taking a vacation. So probably within a week or 10 days after I came home, he and I loaded up the car with a tent and stove and camping gear and whatever else.
That's an awfully good time, it sounds like.
Went to the Badlands and Glacier National Park and Yellowstone and Jackson Hole. And
that's really incredible. I'm looking forward to actually doing the same thing with my dad this next coming summer. It's really neat.
I was not aware at the time, but thinking back on it, like I said, that was late September and into early October of 1971. And I noticed that my dad was laboring a little in his breathing. And like so, I didn't know it at the time, but he had cancer. And he died the following June. So I'm glad I have that time.
Yeah, understandable. It's really exceptional to have gotten to spend that last bit of quality time with someone. I understand. Feel free to take a second if you like.
Even after 50-some years, that still gets to me.
Yeah, certainly. It's a difficult reality of life. In a similar vein, I know you are married now, is that correct? Do you have any kids? A big part of this project is giving people the opportunity to memorialize some of the things that have happened to them and some of the experiences they've had. And frequently there's someone or a group of people who they're excited to share this with. Is there anyone who fits that bill for you?
Well, most of what have said today, I mean, I've talked to my wife about. And just the writing that I've been doing over the last 10 years, trying to recall when this happened or that happened or whatever, uh, has helped me better understand what I did and the process. One longtime friend that we started school together in '63, and I kept in contact, and like I said, our paths crossed again in Cameron in '71, and he passed away in 2021. So there's probably nobody that comes to mind, that like I said, I've talked to my wife. I think my family members, siblings and nieces and nephews and whatever, I haven't really told them a lot about what I did. I think they have the impression that probably I was out there with with the machine gun and the M16 and all of that, but no, there's nobody that comes to mind that probably I would share this with.
Well, I'm excited that just we can make this contribution to our understanding and history, and certainly, hopefully, there will be people who see this who are either inspired or just gain a better understanding of what the world was like back then, and the Vietnam War, and all of its qualities. Similarly, you talked earlier about how you weren't in a combat role and how that was frequently what people thought of soldiers in Vietnam. What was it like to come back home and not fit the bill of what people were of what people considered to be your life in Vietnam? And additionally, how was that exacerbated or noticed in pop culture as well?
One of my soapboxes, and I think a lot of veterans will agree with me, whether they were Korean or World War II or whatever. There's no veteran, no matter what your role was in the military. There's no veteran that has not been wounded, whether physically or mentally. And we all have things that we don't talk about. We all have things that we suppress. I've tried to think about those kind of things. Lost my train of thought. Sorry. Yeah, some of the classmates that I've talked to, and like I said, my roommate will not talk about his experiences at all. Another classmates, I've spoken to him. I think he has a certain bitterness, and I think other things that I've read and other people I've talked to, they ask themselves, why me? Why did I come home and someone else didn't? I think I looked on it as, I was there, I had a job to do, I did it, and I came home. Nobody that I knew or nobody that was under my command was injured or wounded. Well, I'll back up on the injured. Nobody suffered any kind of combat wound. Now, we did have accidents on the job sites, but that's that's a whole different category. Yeah, yeah. Like I said, I was there. I did what I was asked to do, and I came home. I didn't see anybody that had been wounded or suffered any kind of wound. So I wasn't exposed to probably some of the grimness that other people would have been.
I know part of your job was being the liaison for the Vietnamese and the military. What was it? Did you have a lot of interactions with civilians, and what was kind of the general attitude of the Vietnamese as you observed towards the military?
I think I would say the majority of the Vietnamese people were more interested in raising a family and keeping them fed and keeping them somewhat safe. The average Vietnamese had probably no interest in the form of government that was, or, very, very little interest, I'd say, probably in the corruption that was going on over there, or, like I said, whatever form of government they would have been under. They were interested in just basic, everyday, living. The United States tried different programs, pacification and Vietnamization and things like that, trying to get the government, and various programs so that the Vietnamese people could run their own country. But none of that was successful.
Yeah. What had you heard prior to going to Vietnam? I know you mentioned briefly that you left in the summer of '69 while the anti-war movement was growing. Did you hear about any of that? And what did you think of their opinions on the war?
I think mostly what I had heard was that the Vietnamese people were lazy, had no interest in helping themselves. But that was not necessarily true. Like I said, they were more focused on their just staying alive. There were some mid-level people who were trying. I've forgotten the name of the program now, but you had your normal, your average Vietnamese working in the rice fields or growing some other kinds of crops. I was really surprised when I saw corn growing or watermelons or, cucumbers and squash, onions, things like that.
Yeah.
What you hear is rice paddies, but yeah, there were large commercial farms that raised those kinds of vegetables.
Yeah. How's the food in Vietnam, by the way?
Most of the time I was in some kind of a base camp.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a mess hall, and the rations were good.
Okay. It's funny. Again, you hear all different types of stories. I've heard anything ranging from the food was fine to the food was dismal, but I've not heard anyone give a ringing endorsement of it yet.
When I was on a road or on a project someplace, it was sea rations, usually for lunch.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there was, I don't remember the exact time frame, but there was one occasion in which the food was excellent.
And which was this?
For a week.
How come?
We, I don't know what had happened, but for an entire week, you could have filet mignon for breakfast, your choice of filet or lobster tail for lunch, and lobster for dinner.
That's a pretty sweet ration right there.
So, and by the end of the week, the mess sergeant was trading cases of lobster for cases of hamburger. People had gotten tired of filet, and I don't know how it happened or why it happened, but that was the choice.
Interesting.
But like I said, most of the time, the meals were wholesome and filling.
Good, I'm glad. You mentioned earlier that you were trained some for Vietnam in the Corps Cadets, and then obviously, of course, you were deployed to stateside military bases before you actually went to Vietnam.
Yeah.
How was your training, and how did it prepare you to be in Vietnam?
Well, I had no training as an engineer or as someone in construction before I went in the military. This 11-week course, engineer officer basic course that I took at Fort Belvoir, that was supposed to prepare us, for any situation that we ran into, whether it be the horizontal construction, the roads, the bridges, or the vertical construction, which was building housing or warehouses or things like that. When I was at Fort Stewart, Georgia, the battalion that I was assigned to was in the process of moving tank gunnery ranges from one part of the post to another. So I learned a lot about building construction there. Buildings had to be relocated or constructed, and new foundations or whatever poured, concrete foundations for these relocated buildings to set on. The tank gunnery ranges, of course, were quite large and required all kinds of drainage. So installing culverts at the right place, and so that the water and whatever could drain off. One interesting aspect was the railroad construction. One of the tank gunnery ranges had a figure 8 railroad track on it, over a mile of railroad track. Our job was to pick up the rails and move them to one of the new tank gunnery ranges.
Sounds challenging.
It was.
Yeah.
It was. And, just picking it up, unbolting it, the rails and picking it up in 30-foot sections with the ties still attached and then loading it onto a trailer and then taking the trailer to the new location, then offloading it. And at some point, of course, as a figure eight, it has to cross. So trying to figure out how to lay the track down off of the bed itself, and then using your crane and maneuvering and getting the track and then getting the crossover in the right place and keeping it out of your way so you wouldn't run over to things like that. So it was interesting. And I guess another way that we were prepared is that we moved from the main part of the post, which had wooden buildings at the time, to a remote part of the post, and we lived in tents. So the last 3 or 4 months that I was in the United States or in Georgia, I lived in a tent. And when I got overseas, I was in a tent.
How did it compare to being in a tent overseas?
Well, of course, Georgia was warm in itself, but the tent bases in Georgia, of course, had concrete pads. The tents in Vietnam, we had just wooden framework that the tents were pitched over. The tents were about the same size. For us, the 3 officers that lived in the one tent, I think it was called GP Medium. It was probably 16 by 24, 16 by 30, something like that. And we had our own individual areas in there, petitions and things like that within the tent.
So, if you don't mind, I'm gonna go back to what we were talking about previously, further chronologically. You got back home after Vietnam, and you said you spent about 9 months not doing much. You went on that vacation with your father. At what point did you start working again, or kind of resuming a normal life?
Probably June of '72. I heard about a church summer camp that was looking for employees, somebody just to work for the summer. By the time I got into the applying for the job, everything had been filled. So I was invited to just come and spend the summer there. And I spent the summer filling in for other counselors. The director of the camp found out that there was not a complete map of the church proper of the camp property, since it had been bought in 3, 4, 5 different parcels.
Mm-hmm.
So part of the time I was there, I would go to the county courthouse and look up records of the purchase of the property and get plats of the property, and actually fitted the plats together and created a map of the outside boundaries of the property.
That's really cool. Was that kind of the first step in resuming a normal life for you?
Yeah, probably, yes.
What parts of that do you think contributed to, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but some of your healing and just resuming to go back into the world?
Yeah, I think the summer camp helped quite a bit. Like I said, it was a church summer camp, so being exposed to some parts of religion again, and just some of the people that that work there, they probably never knew the experiences I'd had, but just forming friendships and talking to them,
from what I've talked with other veterans in the past before, I've noticed a theme of people finding a lot of comfort in purpose, and a lot of veterans found that felt purposeless after they left the military and found something that helped them. Would you agree with that? And what was your experience like with that?
No, I would say immediately after, like I said, there was not a lot of time. Well, I guess the vacation to the western states, that was part of the decompression, and like I said, spending more time with my father. And then the fall months of 71, like I said, he took time off from work, and we would get out, maybe rabbit hunt or squirrel hunt in the mornings, then get the fishing poles out and have lunch and fish, and then go back to hunt that afternoon. So that was a day-long experience with him.
Yeah.
And like I said, was not aware of his medical conditions at that time. Yeah. So I was, pleased that I had that time with him. And I think from what I was told by family later, my mother was pleased that I was going with him. Otherwise, he would have gone out by himself.
Yeah.
So there was, a purpose there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. What did you begin doing or resume doing after the summer camp?
After the summer camp, I heard about, got to get the time frame right. I heard about a position with the Richmond City Schools as an environmental educator. So I, interviewed for that job and was hired for that, and went to a church summer camp that was being used for this environmental education program, and worked there until January of 73, in which the funding ran out for the program.
How did you enjoy that job while you had it?
Yeah, it was fun. We would, I think, fifth graders from Richmond City Schools would be bussed out to the camp for a week, and they would stay out there, and we would try to instill some awareness of the environment, and and how their actions could affect the environment. And we had a mixture of people as far as races, as counselors and instructors and things like that. And you could pick up fairly quickly on their attitudes, different people's attitudes about different things.
Mm-hmm.
One of the people who worked there was actually an ordained minister.
Oh, wow.
But he had not been selected by a church yet. And like I said, I could probably, if I thought about it a little bit, I could probably come up with their names and their different attitudes about things. But working with most of them was good.
Oh, I'm glad. Since you brought it up, similarly, what was it like going into the military, and did you experience a new exposure to different ethnicities and races or discrimination in that same way?
I think there was discrimination in the military. I wasn't necessarily involved in any fights or anything like that, whether I'm separating, two enlisted men or that kind of thing. We did make fun of the African Americans. Well, and it continues today. You've seen the greeting that, it's called DAP.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we would sometimes see that between two African American and two, whether it be me and an enlisted man or two enlisted men, they would start doing the patty cake like to make fun of them. And like I said, to my knowledge, that never caused any fights or any kind of.
I hope not. It's rather lighthearted.
So it just, I think we all realize, the situation we were in and what we,
Yeah.
that we were all, to borrow a phrase, we were all in it together. So let's make the best of it.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that. So it sounds to me at least like whether there was, any hatefulness, there was, whether that was there or not, there was just at least an attention that was called to the differences in people's races and ethnicities. Was that accurate?
Yeah. I think in a lot of situations, we probably had not been exposed. We did not have any kind of, my high school was not integrated until 1962, I think. Up until then, I had no direct contact with African American or black person at all.
Do you remember when your high school was integrated?
Yeah, like so, 1962.
Do you remember what that was like? And
there were no difficulties that I saw. I think there were only 4, maybe 5 black students that came to that high school. And somewhere around 65, 66, I heard about this. I think somebody realized somebody at the high school realized the potential for a particular black player, what he could contribute to the basketball team. So people's attitudes changed a little bit.
There's an entire Disney movie about this. Remember the Titans. Darn it, the South loves racism, but they love sports more.
Exactly.
Exactly. No, that's really funny, but I'm glad you mentioned that.
But when I was at Belvoir, going through the officer basic, there was not sufficient housing on the post. So we were given a per diem, a daily allowance, and to find some place to live off post. And just, there was a black officer going through the same course I was. He had no place to live either, so we just teamed up and lived together for about a month and a half.
Neat. Did that affect any of your understanding or relationships with any of your platoon members who were African American?
I think so, yeah. Like I say, we maybe six weeks or something like that we were together. Then we heard about an apartment that was available for short term, so we found another officer, and the 3 of us moved into the apartment for the rest of the time we were there, which was only about 5 or 6 weeks.
Gotcha. And what year was that again?
68.
68. So this was just a bit before you deployed.
Yeah, we, and well, while I was there, like I said, September to November of 68, a lot of D.C. was being burned down.
Was this because of Dr. King's assassination?
No, King's assassination was in April of 68,
Okay.
but it was just this racial tension, I think, in general. Like, K Street and 14th Street and those areas were just the racial tensions and things that would maybe a minor incident. Well, I don't know, maybe sometime in October of 68, the police were on scene, I think, trying to arrest somebody. An officer drew his gun and fired into the sidewalk. The bullet ricocheted and hit an 8-year-old girl and killed her.
Oh, wow.
And that set off a riot.
Yeah.
And, police cars were turned over and burned, and houses and businesses or whatever else were looted and, and burned as well. And that lasted all weekend.
Yeah. So I'm curious then, what was it like for you during 2020, during all of the protests and violence that erupted after George Floyd's death? What kind of parallels did you see there? And did you notice anything that felt reminiscent of 1968?
Yeah, I can see comparisons and parallels in the George Floyd or some of the others that have been killed by the police for no apparent reason. I think it's going to take another 2 or 3 generations before there's equality. I mean, my parents' generation, they were raised with a certain attitude. My generation are probably a little more liberal, but not much. I mean, we get our attitudes and impressions from our parents.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, it's going to take another 2 or 3 generations. I would say, if you look at all of history, I would say probably Asian Americans are more accepted than African Americans. I don't know why, but
Mm-hmm.
they were more quickly and more accepted than probably African Americans. I guess there's generations and attitudes and I guess it goes back to the slavery thing.
Yeah. It's a sad reality, certainly. Did you feel like your exposure to African Americans during the wartime, did it in any way shape your feelings towards the Vietnamese, the citizens that you were able to interact with, and really also more so on a general level, just about your service and the citizens of Vietnam?
My first driver, as an officer, I was not allowed to drive.
Mm-hmm.
I had to be driven every place I went, supposedly. My first driver was African American, and we got along, really well. Until he went downtown and bought some kind of a drug he wasn't supposed to, and I just could not allow him to drive for me after that. He went back to driving, operating some kind of a piece of equipment. A large part of the time I drove the vehicle myself.
Yeah.
And I tried operating all kinds of pieces of equipment, whether it be a D7 dozer, a grader, drove a 10-ton tractor with an attached trailer. Like I said, I tried driving all of that, even the big earth-moving equipment, the big scrapers that you see moving dirt from one place, soil from one place to another.
Yeah.
The guy that was trying to teach me how to operate it, I think he gave up after a while. I just, diesel engines, you have to keep the revolutions up, on the engine, and I just couldn't. I was operating it like a car. If I wanted to slow down, I would let off on the accelerator.
It's interesting. I've fortunately gotten the opportunity to use one of those excavators once before, and it is quite fun, I will say. Challenging to learn, though. You're not wrong. So, Mr. Vaughan, I want to return some back to your time after the service. What would you consider your career for your life after the military?
Well, since I had majored in forestry and wildlife management, I thought that would be my career, and I applied for several jobs. I even, while I was in D.C., Fort Belvoir in 1971, finishing out my time on active duty, I even approached embassies about working in Africa or Europe or something like that, but none of that worked out. I worked at a number of different jobs, sometimes 2 years, 3 years, and I think I told you this on the phone, got dissatisfied for one reason or another.
Yeah. You mentioned on the phone earlier that a lot of your time was spent in landscaping. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you feel like your service in Vietnam prepared you in any way for that kind of a job?
Probably not.
No?
No. It was just something I enjoyed doing, and I probably worked at it for 25 years. My wife jokes, and her line is that I performed services for older ladies. Most of my clients were in their 70s or 80s or sometimes in their 90s, and I would actually spend more time sitting and talking to them once a week or once every 2 weeks than I actually did, than actually doing work for them.
Yeah.
And I may have been the only person they had seen that week, that kind of thing. So it was, interesting talking to them and listening to their life experiences.
Do you feel drawn to that kind of connection typically?
I think so, yeah.
Is that perhaps one of the reasons why landscaping was attractive to you, or was that more so you making something out of your situation?
No, as far as the landscaping and grass cutting and planting shrubs and flowers and things like that, it's something I enjoy doing and still do. I'm keeping up my own lawn now and whatever. It started out maybe with just one or two. I had no intention of trying to do that for 20 or 30 years, but it just worked out that way.
That sounds incredibly rewarding. Similarly, did you ever get involved in any veterans organizations?
No. After I came off active duty, I was called and approached by the American Legion and VFW and even the reserves, and I was not interested in joining any of that kind of organization at all.
What about them did you not were you not interested in?
Yeah, just not interested.
Have you gotten any opportunities to connect with veterans in a different setting?
Well, like I said, since 2017, when our class had its 50th reunion, I've sat and talked with classmates and about their experiences. My brother-in-law served in Vietnam as well, so I've talked to him as well. And I just one day just was on the streets of Vinton and ran across somebody that I'd gone to high school with. And he had served as well and wanted me to come to the VFW meeting.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've seen him since, but it was just one of those random things, just running into him.
Yeah. Well, I would like to ask too. I'm sorry. I'll relate the 2 points in a second. Were you ever exposed to Agent Orange in your service?
No, not that I am aware of. Let's put it that way.
Hopefully.
Yes.
Understood. Do you keep up at all with the push from a lot of those veterans organizations, but also from individuals themselves to receive compensation and disability for Vietnam veterans who now struggle from illnesses or diseases that may have very likely been aided by Agent Orange?
Well, no, not particularly. My oldest brother served in the Army, and I'd say from 1959 to 1962. He was assigned to the 25th Infantry Division. They would spend 6 months in Hawaii and 6 months in Thailand. And he thought he was exposed to Agent Orange. But, nothing has ever been revealed or know that the Agent Orange was ever used in Thailand. I think what he was seeing was probably an insecticide being sprayed.
Gotcha.
But he did apply, and of course the benefits for him were denied. But he did not apply for the benefits until he was diagnosed with cancer.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. It's certainly not a perfect situation.
Yeah. But as far as well, I was surprised to watch a PBS program that Agent Orange was still being used up until about 15 years ago.
Oh my.
It was being sprayed on national forest land in the state of Oregon. And I cannot recall the lady's name, but she tried to bring a lawsuit, and was unsuccessful. But just the footage from that program, and the damage that is continuing to be done in Vietnam because of Agent Orange. The soil is unusable.
Yeah.
And because of the chemical is still in the soil, the people that are trying to work the soil, are absorbing it into their bodies. And there's still children in Vietnam being born with birth defects because of Agent Orange.
Did you keep up at all with the government's knowledge of Agent Orange and its potential side effects? Was that something that stayed on your radar or that you're aware of?
Yeah, I did read about it, yes. And, and like I said, to my knowledge, I was never exposed to it. So for me to be thinking about applying for the benefits or anything like that, that did not occur to me. But why it was kept secret for so long and why the government denied benefits, for such a long period of time, I couldn't understand.
Did that in any way change your political views on what happened in Vietnam, or at least contribute to your thoughts on the situation?
Yeah. I've read newspaper accounts, of course, of the Pentagon Papers. I've never read the papers themselves or the books that were published about it, but just newspaper accounts. And I believe now that there are a number of subjects that are being kept from us. The government is hiding a number of things, political secrets or whatever, or there were certain things that were happening in Vietnam that we were aware of, like the CIA running the drug business in Laos, and there was a private aviation company called Air America, which was run by the CIA. Mm-hmm. We were not really officially aware of it, but we knew what was going on.
Yeah. What was it like for you coming home to an overwhelmingly negative view of the war, and knowing what you did know about how things were getting run behind the scenes some?
Like I said earlier, I was not really exposed to any of the riots or any kind of negative comments directed at me. So like I said, I had done my job. I was at home and let it go at that.
Gotcha. Did you at any point end up giving it more consideration than that? Reflecting, memorializing on your service some, and considering what, sorry if you'll excuse me, and coming to terms with the United States involvement in the war and where you thought that should have been?
Well, I felt when I continued in the ROTC program and accepted a commission that I had an obligation that I should fulfill, and going to Vietnam as part of the United States Army was part of that obligation. The United States was a member of SEATO, Southeast Asia, Treaty Organization, whatever it was, which apparently fell apart not too long after 1975.
Yeah.
So, I felt that, that was, I had made a commitment, like I said, to stay in the ROTC program for them for the classes and the education that I got here at Virginia Tech, as well as the military training that I got through the ROTC. And I, needed to fulfill that obligation as far as my not serving or becoming a conscientious objector or going to Canada, that kind of thing never entered my mind.
Yeah. Understand. Did you know anyone who did any of those things to try and dodge the draft?
Yes. One of my classmates applied for conscientious objector status.
What were your thoughts on that?
He applied. Well, he was no, I won't tell you his position because I don't want to tell you his name.
Understood.
Yeah, he applied for religious reasons.
Understood.
And well, he graduated in '67, and for 3 years he fought, with the Army about going on active duty. And I think after 3 years, the Army just kind of gave up on him and granted him the status. At least from my conversations with him, that's the way it came across.
Gotcha.
And he was also in graduate school as well, so that had a little bit to do with it.
Yeah, understood. So I'm getting close to being able to wrap up, but before I do that, I wanted to start by giving you the opportunity to just share any thoughts or stories that are prevalent in your mind that you haven't gotten to yet, if there is any.
No, a lot. I'd say a lot of the the prevalent memories or whatever. We've talked about the paving operation and the lobster and the fillet for a week and just the different projects that I had to do. I was a bit of an independent operator in that I was assigned maybe to one organization, one unit, one company, but my platoon was detached from that company and just assigned randomly here or there to other units that needed assistance with some kind of a project. So I had a platoon of 30 to 35 men, and we were responsible for other units fed us and housed us, but we were responsible for our own maybe our own security, our own discipline, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I would move maybe in a month, 3 months, 2 months, whatever, just depending on whatever assignment was involved. And somewhat that was kind of a sense of satisfaction too, that knowing that a company commander 200 miles away, trusted me to get the job done and to take care of the men.
Yeah. It's a lot of responsibility, certainly.
Well, one of the things we were taught in the officer basic course was take care of your equipment because it's hard to replace.
Mm-hmm.
Take care of your men because they're a little more easily replaced. And you come third.
Yeah.
So that was, that stuck with me.
Yeah. How did you put that into practice?
What I talked about earlier, like I said, making sure that the men, when they came in at night, took care of their equipment, make sure they were ready to go the next day, and tried to make them as comfortable as possible, depending on where we were. Well, I will tell you this one story. one unit that I was attached to, or my platoon was attached to, was probably 50 miles north of Long Bend. And I had different equipment from what the company I was attached to. I had older equipment, and I wasn't getting the repair parts or whatever that I needed, even air filters and oil filters and, V-belts, that kind of thing. So I would make trips to Long Bend and visit other engineer units and fill out paperwork to get the supplies that I needed. And one of these trips that I was there, I stopped in at another engineer unit at the mess hall and asked the mess sergeant if I could eat there. My driver and I, if we could eat there. And he said, sure, come on in, no problem. So when I was leaving, I don't know, somehow he thought he knew me or recognized me for some reason. When I was leaving, he gave me a case of steaks, which I took back to my men, and they had a cookout that night. And every time that I went back to Long Bend after that, I would stop in at the same mess hall, and he would always give me something. Of course, they were frozen, but still, it was whether it was a half a chicken or steak or whatever, he would always give me something to take back, and I think the men appreciated that.
Yeah,
to have something different from what was being served in the mess hall, or that that particular day or whatever.
Yeah, it's not to suggest that the way you treated your men was a consequence of fear, but there are stories about fragging and noncompliance with officers. What experiences did you have with any of those things? And, what was it like trying to earn the trust of your men?
I can't say that I ever sat down, with the entire platoon or whatever and said, this is what I expect of you. Like I said, I think we all understood why we were there and what we had to do. I was on one little project, and we were only there for 4 days. And one of the men kept disappearing at lunchtime. And I wondered, what are you up to? So I found out, well, this particular little compound had a bar, so he was having liquid lunch. So I talked to him, and I said, we got a job to do. We got a short period of time to do it. Let's get it going. You can, after we finish work for the day, you can do that, but not while we're working. I said, if that doesn't satisfy, when we get back to the company compound, I'll talk to the captain about court-martialing you. And that was all there was to it. I found out later that this same enlisted man, on a prior occasion, had gotten mad at an officer and soaked his Jeep with diesel fuel and set the Jeep on fire.
Wow.
He had already been court-martialed. I didn't know that.
Well, that makes your threat a lot more scary now.
Yeah. But, like I said, we came to an understanding, and he was, we got the job done that we needed to do, and, got in the helicopter and flew back.
I'm glad. Mr. Vaughan, one of the other big purposes of this project is that we're coming up on the 50th anniversary of the fall of Saigon. Do you recall where you were during that moment, or when you found out about it?
75. Actually, I don't. The company that I was working for at that time was based in Atlanta, and like I said, I traveled for about 3 years with them, living out of a suitcase, and I don't recall where I was, or remember seeing the footage on the television and all of that, but exactly, whether I was in West Virginia or Michigan or New York, I don't know.
Yeah. What were some of the feelings or thoughts in your head that you were experiencing during that, though?
I think probably the same feelings as a lot of other people. A lot of wasted lives, a lot of wasted money. Vietnam never came across as being a winnable war. It was not. It was different from anything that that the United States had experienced before, but the Pentagon or whoever, the higher ups, the upper part of the chain of command, it never came across as a war that we were going to win. It was just to keep the country divided into North Vietnam and South Vietnam, and supposedly to keep communism out of South Vietnam. And it's like it never came across as being a war that was to be won. And some of the stories that I heard about units in combat spending a day or 2 days or 3 days battling and losing men and capturing a particular hill or a particular area, and then 24 hours later abandoning the area, and then the Viet Cong or the North Vietnamese Army just came right back in, and then maybe a month later the U.S. forces had to go back and try to recapture that same territory and lose, with the loss of more lives.
And were you aware of how unwinnable it was during your service, or was this something you kind of came to realize later?
No, I think the news reports, in the 65, 66, 67, things like that, it just never, it just never came across as a war that the United States wanted to win. Just the way it came across to me.
Was that discouraging while you were over there?
Somewhat. Probably even more discouraging, if I had been artillery or infantry or something like that, especially infantry, where you're, like I said, a 3-day battle and then you abandon the area the next day. I mean, that would definitely affect my attitude considerably. But like I said, with being an engineer, we were improving the infrastructure of the country with widening the roads and paving them, building new bridges, replacing damaged bridges, constructing a lot of airfields. During the day, the South Vietnamese people could use those roads and bridges to take maybe products to market or to the little village markets or whatever. And during the night, the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese Army could use those same roads and those same bridges.
Yeah.
So, nobody. I think there were some incidents where where engineers were involved in combat, but none of the units that I was associated with had any experiences like that.
I know I asked you about the fall of Saigon. Do you remember when the American prisoners of war were released as well? I believe that was in 1971.
Yes. Some of them came home in 71 and some as late as 73.
What was that like?
Yeah, I was, yeah, was very pleased to see them released and back with their families. Of course, there are always stories or rumors about prisoners that were never released, and soldiers that deserted and, spent years living in Vietnam after they deserted. There were stories like that. Not, I didn't experience any of that personally as far as any of my men deserting or anything like that. But, there were stories like that. And
Yeah.
I know one incident in particular where where a specialist traded a Jeep for a medical discharge.
Oh, wow.
A medical unit and doctors wanted a vehicle. So he said, "I'll get you one." So he traded a Jeep for a medical discharge.
It's awfully slimy, but I don't know how much I blame him.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Is there any way that you like to memorialize your time in Vietnam? Look back on it?
No. I think I told you that I'd been writing or recording some of my memories or recollections. I mean, that started probably 10 years ago, and then integrating the pictures that I took into the writing. And one thing that did come to my mind, I guess I was expected to go to the PX and buy the medals that were awarded for the time in service. I did not do that. So probably 3 years ago now, I wrote to the National Personnel Center in St. Louis and asked them to review my records and to issue the medals that I have been awarded. In June of last year, I received a letter from the Personnel Center saying that yes, this, and this, and this, you were to receive these medals, and we have notified an Army center in Philadelphia to ship the medals to you. I'm still waiting.
Well, that's how the government works, doesn't it? What medals did you get awarded?
Nothing extremely serious. I mean, everybody wore the National Defense Service Medal, which was red with maybe a couple of yellow stripes in it. The Vietnam Service Medal and the Vietnam Campaign Medal. And I was awarded 2 Army Commendation Medals, one for an achievement and one for service while I was there. And going through the records that I have, I found a set of orders in which the government of South Vietnam had awarded me a Civic Action Medal First Class. And I was not even aware until I started going through those orders that had happened.
Yeah.
So none of these, I don't have any of these medals.
Yeah. Did you decorate your uniform when you were coming home, or have you've never had them?
I was given the 2 Army Commendation Medals by my company commander before I left Vietnam. Like I said, the other 3, I think I was supposed to go to the PX and buy them. I didn't. I did, I don't know, probably some street vendor, some Vietnamese had probably made up the medals, so I just bought them there and, tied them together and wore them on my uniform, but they were not official medals.
Gotcha. When I mentioned earlier, I asked you how you memorialized. Have you ever been to the Vietnam Memorial and seen the wall with all the names on it?
I have not seen the wall, no. My wife and I and her niece and I think a couple of the niece's grandchildren, and we took a train trip to D.C., and one of our purposes was to go to the wall. But at that time, the reflecting pool was being renovated or something.
Oh,
And we went on the wrong side of a construction fence and just did not have time to double back to get there to go. I know there are traveling exhibits of the wall. Maybe 5 or 6 years ago, there was a smaller version of it on the lawn of the VA hospital in Salem. I did go there
gotcha.
and look at that. And there's also a computer printout of all of the names in alphabetical order, not the way they are on the wall, but
Yeah. How was that?
yeah, there were a couple of people that I knew, either from here at Tech or from from Roanoke. But just to see their names written, and that's can be emotional.
Yeah. Was it a do you think that the wall and the memorial does a good job of letting it be a really honorable and kind of heroic thing to have your name on there? And what kind of emotions were going through your head?
I don't know. Like I said, it's well, the few people, the 3 or 4 people that that I knew and that I went to school with here, and one of them was a year, no, 2 years ahead of me in my ROTC company. So to know that that they had been in Vietnam and had been killed there, that's like I said, definitely emotional and to have known them. I mean, the rest of the names are, unless you have some direct connection, it's a name on a wall. I mean, you could go to a courthouse and a World War II memorial or Korean memorial or something like that, and a list of names, and unless you have some personal connection to that name, to that person, I don't really have any feelings like but like I said, to somebody that you have met, somebody that you spent some time with, it can be a little depressing.
I'm sorry to hear that. So certainly a harrowing experience, I imagine. What would you want future generations to understand about both war in general and the Vietnam War in particular?
Well, I think as long as we have differences of opinion, we're always going to have a conflict, whether it's regional, as in the Middle East now, or worldwide, like World War II, World War I. I think I would like to see fewer conflicts I would like to see probably the younger generation to study more in depth what happened during World War II or even Korea or Vietnam. Do not base your opinion strictly on a 20-second video that you saw on your cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
Read more, study more. I mean, remarking earlier that during the pandemic, my classmates and I exchanged emails, and we recommended books to read. And one of the classmates, he seemed to have a real interest in World War II, especially the Pacific. So he recommended books that we read. They weren't necessarily subjects of strategy or tactics or something like that. They were more personal accounts. Which probably gives us a better insight into the individual and the sort of attitude that a person takes into battle. Someone like Eisenhower or Churchill or Montgomery or whatever. I mean, they control thousands of men, but when it comes down to platoon or squad or an equipment operator, their attitudes and their experiences are just as important as those supreme commanders.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. And if anything, I can imagine that's some excellent motivation for you finishing your memoir, because that is, a similar situation with yourself where your own experiences are really quite vital for us understanding that piece of history. And I'd like to reiterate just how grateful I am that you're willing to share these experiences with us and contribute to history in that way. Lastly, but before I wrap up, I have one last question for you, but is there anything else that you care to share with us? Any topics I haven't visited that you'd like me to?
Well, one thing that might be humorous.
Certainly, yeah.
When you were setting the scene and doing the introduction, you said that my name is Don Vaughan. That's not my given name.
Oh, my apologies. What is your given name?
My full name is Marshall Darnell Vaughan. Don is strictly a nickname. It's not related to my given name at all.
Understood. Well, I'm sorry about that mix-up. My uncle is Uncle Don, and he's actually Donald Smith is his last name.
Well, a lot of people hear Don, and my family actually calls me Donnie.
Gotcha.
And people that I've met here at Tech and beyond know me as Don, and my wife calls me Don.
Yeah.
But it depends on the situation. I have multiple identities.
Yeah.
Professional people's doctors and nurses and dentists and things like that, they usually use my first name. A lot of friends that I've met over the years, they only know me by that name. And when my wife and I were getting married, and they were addressing cards to Mr. and Mrs. Donald, and they assumed that Don was a shortened.
Yeah.
But no.
Well, I'll be sure to correct that in the paperwork at the very least.
Yeah. Well, the paperwork that I filled out earlier, that has my full name on it. So
I'm glad to hear it. All right. Well, Mr. Vaughan, we'll drop the first name. How would you like to be remembered?
Good question. I don't know. I've tried to lead a life that could be helpful to other people and kind. That's probably about it.
It's an honorable way to be remembered.